Mayor, Councilman Shelley's on, so I think everyone but for Councilman Fletcher, who, as I mentioned, will be about 30 minutes late, everyone else is on.
Very good. We're ready, and the city clerk is ready. We'll move forward.
We are ready, and as everyone knows, this is a second public budget workshop subsequent to our July workshop, and I'm going to turn this over to Carlos and to IT to go through the PowerPoint presentation.
Okay. Do we need to read the disclaimer and the public comments disclaimer, Mr. Pearl?
Yeah, I was about to jump in and ask you if you could just read the disclaimer before we get started.
Sure. Okay. Again, today is what is today? August 11th, 2020. This is City of Homestead, second in a series of budget workshops. Pursuant to Executive Order 20-69 issued by Governor DeSantis and the City of Homestead's local state of emergency due to COVID-19, this will be a virtual council workshop. This meeting can be viewed live on the City Access channel or live stream at cityofhomestead.com/public meeting. In addition thereto, public comments will be accepted as part of the meeting, which can be emailed to publiccomments@cityofhomestead.com, and those comments will be accepted for up to 30 minutes after the close of the meeting. Comments should be limited to 300 words per comment, and those submitting comments should provide their name and address for the record. So, and we'll note also for the record that all council members, with the exception of Councilman Fletcher, are currently present, and we expect him to join us momentarily. So, over to you now, Mr. Perez.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay, all right. If we can go to the next slide. So the purpose of this workshop is to discuss the budget challenges of 2020. The budget challenges an overview of the 2021 budget, discuss some pending items that we still have, discuss the general fund balance, where we expect that it's going to be, address some council concerns and questions, and hopefully finalize the 2021 proposed budget, the budget hearings, which would include proposing a reduced operating millage. If we recall, we set it at 10 mils. So the idea would be to set it lower than that for whatever it needs to be. And the tentative operating millage, again, that was set at 10 mils for the trend. Next. So if we look at 2020, the budgeted revenues that we had starting the year, we have a projected state shared revenue loss of $2.2 million. We also had some projected loss in permits and licenses, and we've also had some projected losses in some other revenues having to do with, miscellaneous other departments, parks, police, things like that. So the subtotal before any CRA funding brings it down from $50.4 million to $47.3 million. With the CRA reimbursement for Cyberium, furniture, fixtures, and equipment of $600,000, that puts the projected 2020 revenues as of the 8/7/20 estimate at $47.9 million. If we get next. Okay, so we start with that, and then we compare it to the budgeted expenditures of $50.4 million. So obviously we have an initial gap of $2.4 million. There's been some operational savings of about $1.4 million. And basically that brings our budgeted gap, the gap for 2020, to just under $1 million. But then we have all the COVID expenditures of over $1 million. Most of those were police overtime. That brings our subtotal before any COVID assistance or grants of just over $2 million. We did get a DOJ grant for COVID-19. I did already submit for the drawdown on that on the 7th. So that money should basically be in the bank. So that puts our gap at just under $2 million at $1,916,349. Next. Okay. Then one of the things that we'll discuss, and we'll wait till the end, is we went through all the departments, but obviously with the mayor council, that would turn it over to all of you as a consensus to agree. But we saw that there's about $104,000 worth of reductions funds that haven't been used to date. We don't anticipate those being used. So if council would approve and we use those and gets absorbed, then we've got $1.8 million is what the gap would be. Okay, next, sorry. Okay, so then looking at what the fund balance was starting into this year, you had the required reserve of almost $4.8 million, funds that were appropriated for the 2020 budget of $1.1 million, and the unassigned of $651. So a total spendable fund balance of $6.5 million. Absorbing the shortfall that we just went through, that we're anticipating of $1.8 million, that would leave us at, that would leave us at $4,761,127. Okay, and then at the bottom, I'm showing some potential monies that could come in before the end of the year. You know, we can't guarantee that it will or not, but from FEMA, from Hurricane Irma, we are expecting at least $5.2 million of potential reimbursement. And then for the CARES Act or FEMA for COVID-19, there's a little over $1 million also that we anticipate that we could get reimbursed for. But again, that we don't guarantee anything before 9/30. We hopefully, if we do, it'd be great. Next. So that was 2020. Now looking at 2021, this is what I kind of the initial shock, because at one time the lowest revenue projections that we were looking at with the loss of revenues going into 2021 was down to $47,528,000. Yet the expenditures that were excuse me one second. I apologize for that technical difficulty. The highest expenditure request when we started the budget process from all the departments in the general fund, again, this is dealing with the general fund, was at $51.2 million. So we were looking at a possible gap of $3.7 million. Next. So let's look at the revenues. The revenues from last year were $50.4 million. So this is kind of reconciling as to how we come up with the revenues that we're looking at for this year. We lost, last year we had $800,000, which really was a one-time transfer from the CRA into CDBG. So that was not going to be available. We talk about the loss of state shared revenues, almost $2.4 million. We did receive an increase in property taxes by leaving, if we leave the millage rate at 5.9215, and then other increases of about $387,000. That puts us at $49,157,311. And again, this is before the library taxes and before a reimbursement from the CRA. Okay, next. So now if we add the library taxes for the cybrarium at the rate of 0.2840, which is the same thing that the county was charging. So this is really not an impact to the taxpayers. It would be a shift. But on our side, it would have to be included as part of our operating millage. It can't be reported as a separate line item on the trim notice. But that would bring in $836,332. So the latest revenue projection would be $49,993,644. Next. So now let's look at the expenditure side, and we're going to look at two views of this. The first view is what was projected from the departments, what they had been asking for. And again, these requests were without staffing and without CIPs. So this was just for their operating expenditures. So by looking, we had department cuts of $1.4 million. We've added the CIPs for the 22 police cars. So again, by financing it over 5 years, the impact to the general fund is the $214,275, leaving the proposed budget before cybrarium operations at $49,975,266. We add the cybrarium operations of $1,189,022, and that gives us a proposed budget with a cybrarium of $51,164,288. Now we're going to look at another view of this same thing, of how we arrived at the same amount. Next. And this is comparing last year's budget. So you can see the significant changes between last year's budget and the current budget of $51,164,288. Again, the significant increases, adding cybrarium operations, an increase to the police pension, increase to the health insurance, the CIPs for the police that we asked about, a reduction in the GE pension plan, reduction for the elections. And again, that goes every year. One year you're going to see it as an increase, one year you're going to see it as a decrease, but it's there nonetheless, significant. And then $1,562,114,000 in reductions or cuts from fiscal year 2020 to 2021, leaving us at the $51,164,288. Next. So when we compare the projected revenues that we looked at and the proposed budget that we looked at in two different versions, we're still looking at a gap of $1,176,43. So now let's see how we can further reduce that. Next. One way is by having the CRA contribute towards the Cybrarium FF&E of $353,000. And remember, the Cybrarium is actually, the CRA is actually going to benefit from the cyber tax, because for any increase, for that tax applied to their properties, the CRA actually generates about $103,000 in additional tax revenues as well. Okay, so that would bring our gap to $817,643. Now the next things are, again, is for council to kind of give us direction on this. And next slide. Okay, we've identified for next year potential $102,000 worth of stuff in the mayor and council's budget that could possibly be reduced. Some overtime, some miscellaneous supplies, some travel and training related to ICSC, in the council divisions, liaison, hardware accounts, some travel and training, and then three committees that may have little or no activity, the possibility of, reducing those or unfunding for this year. And again, we can always come back to this. So I'm going to move forward. Next. So assuming mayor and council approves this, it would bring the gap down from 817 to 715,000. But there's some additional things that we want to consider that we want to discuss tonight as well. Next. And those are the janitorial services, which I believe is coming to council at the next council meeting, which, if approved, would generate a $47,000 savings in janitorial services for the general fund. The other items are landscape mowing schedule, maybe reducing the frequency of landscape, and also considering some changes for the seasonal pool operations of $141,344. So that would now bring the impact to 2021 of $526,874. Next. So again, looking back at the general fund starting this fiscal year and considering the shortfall for 2020 of $1.8 million, the shortfall for 2021 of $526,000, and considering that at least between now and 9/30/2021, we are certain we will have the FEMA money by then. We are certain we will have gotten reimbursement for the COVID and CARES Act. So if you consider all those funding that would be coming in, you're looking at a projected fund balance of almost $10.6 million. Okay, that's kind of an overview of 20 and 21 of how we got where we were and the challenges. The next part of this presentation is a bit of an overview of the budget that was provided to you. And again, it's to date. It needs some tweaking. Some things still need to be defined. But the second part of the presentation is kind of the normal overview that we go through with the budget. Next. So again, just historically showing that for the last 7 years, we've kept the millage rate has remained at 5.9215. Next. This is just reminding that even though we're bringing in the Cybrarium operations at $1,189,022 between the library tax and the first year subsidy from the CRA of $352,689, basically it's in balance so that the net effect to the general fund is really zero. Even though the budget will increase because of the Cybrarium operations, the net effect to the general fund, because the revenues are coming in as well, is zero. Next. Next. Okay, so this is just an overview of property values, and Mr. Mayor, this was for you. I know you didn't like the ones that showed the history and showing all how we had lost so many revenues, so I kind of simplified it. Basically, with property values that have increased by 10.8%, and then the tax revenues that go with that before the library tax it's $1,548,453. Obviously, with the library tax, it's $836,333. And then I'm just showing for comparisons 2019, and then just showing comparison in 2008 what the property values were. So we're still slightly under the 2008 levels, but we're almost there. Next. My favorite slide. Nobody likes it except me, but I know it seems a little ridiculous because it looks like the budget is still higher in 2021 than in 2007, and we're saying we're doing more with less. But again, if you consider two other factors, one is the population, how the population has grown by 32%, and then the CPI has increased by 24%, yet our general fund budget has only increased 8.5%. I think we are truly doing more with less. Next. This is just kind of an overview of the general fund revenues, the different sources where they come from. Obviously, the ad valorem is at 35.8. It's slightly higher because now it includes the library taxes in there. Unfortunately, this year in red, you see it, but it's an appropriation of fund balance for that gap, but it's for one time. So, for things like that, that's what fund balances are designed for unexpected things like that for one time. State shared revenues obviously declined from the previous year because of those loss of almost $2.4 million in revenues. Next. And this is kind of where the general fund monies goes to. Police making, almost 56% of the entire general fund budget. And, by comparison, we only get property taxes of about $17.5 million without the library tax. That only covers about 61% of the police budget. Next. This is just an overview of the departments within the general fund, the 20 adopted to the 2021 proposed budget. Next. And again, I may be repeating myself, but this is the major, the most significant increases or changes rather from the 2020 budget to the 2021 proposed budget. Again, the cybrarium operations of $1,189,000, police pension $695,000, health insurance $536,000, the general fund CIPs, which is the police 22 vehicles, $214,275. Then the most significant reductions: elections $253,000, general employees pensions $76,000, and then department cuts and reductions of $1,562,000. Basically, it leaves the change. It's still an increase of $744,828, but it's only an increase of 1.5% from the prior year. Next. This is just showing the general fund CIP. There's only one, the police vehicles, the 22. The cost is $991,452, but again, because we're financing it over 5 years, the impact of the general fund is only $214,275. Next. Now, this is the entire, these are the enterprise funds, just an overview of what makes up the most of it. Obviously, it's electric utility has the biggest budget there. Next. This is the entire city's budget. Again, general fund only makes about 27% of the entire city's budget. The enterprise funds make 53%. One thing I do want to point out, the capital projects, the reason it's also so less is in your budget books, you will see that, like the cybrarium, you don't see a proposed budget for that. And that, again, is intentional. With capital projects, what we do is we come back to you in November and we reappropriate any unused funds. The reason we don't do it now is because we'd be estimating, and if I budget something, I'd be coming back to you again a second time to change that. So we all agree that in November we come back to you with those capital projects and we reappropriate those unused funds. Next. This is a comparison of the 2020 budgets to the 2021 budgets. Again, we discussed the general fund, the most significant differences. A couple of things to point out is the water and sewer is budgeted, is balanced with the assumption that we will approve that 6.38% CPI rate increase. So the revenues that are projected in water and sewer are assuming the revenues that would be generated with that rate increase. Another thing to notice is impact fees has gone down. part of that is because the expected impact fees that we expected to collect last year didn't come in as much, and also the $1.7 million of the Art in Public Places is expected to be expended. That was appropriated. If it doesn't get expended at the end of this year, that will be part of what comes to you in November for a reappropriation of those funds for the suburban project. Under the internal service funds, the most significant increase there is, again, the health insurance that went up. Almost everything else pretty much stayed the same way. Okay, next. Okay, just information. The maximum millage rate is 10, which is actually what we set it for. The trim notice, the rollback rate would have been 5.5697. The current rate is 5.9215. As far as that's, I apologize. Okay, next. Okay, and then these are the things for council considerations, and I may leave it at this slide for a bit, and maybe we can start having some of these discussions. We're asking, as far as mayor and council potential reductions for 2020, the savings of $104,000. For 2021, the reductions of the $102,000. For the parks, some saving considerations, again, reducing the frequency of landscaping and mowing, possibly changing the seasonal pool operation hours. Then some additional programs for consideration, 10 additional police officers, which would have a cost of a little over $1.5 million, and that does include the cost of financing vehicles for each of those officers. And then the body cameras for 113 sworn police officers, which is $779,799. That would be the first, for the first year. That does include a one-time $50,000 improvement cost, but that does include staffing and equipment. And then again, the millage rate, right now, we know that at a minimum, we want to reduce it from 10 and to reducing it to the 6.2055 mils, which includes the normal millage rate that we've been approving for the last 7 years of 5.9212. I'm sorry, that should be 5.9215. My mistake. And the library tax of 0.2840. Okay, and then the debt millage rate, which is 0.4485 mils. I can go to the next slide, or I can leave it there. What would you like me to do? Keep going. Well, I'll just finish the presentation, and we can always come back to the slide and open it for discussion. The next slide. Okay, these are just budget reminders that once we finalize the 2021 budget, we will put it on the city's website, and we hope to make this available Friday, September the 4th. Next slide. And then just a reminder of the budget hearing. The first budget hearing is September the 8th. The final budget hearing is September the 23rd. These will be virtual meetings, and below is the web link and the audio conference number and access code. This is the same information that the county will be putting on the trim notices that will be mailed out probably in the next week or second week. And next. I thank you. And I guess if you want to go back 2 slides, Felix, the one that had the consideration for mayor council, and we can leave it there, open it up to this or any questions that the mayor and council may have.
Council members? Any initial questions or comments to council?
I have one quick question to start, please.
Sure.
Thank you, Mayor. The seasonal pool operation hours, is that Road George and where else?
Pedro, I'm sorry. Do you think you can?
Yes. Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, that is just for Roby George Pool. Mm-hmm. What we're proposing would be shutting it down during the school year and only opening it during the summer.
Okay. Pedro, how often would you say it gets used during the school year?
Very limited use. You really don't have many people utilizing it. The summer is pretty much the prime time.
Okay, because I have been working on something with one of the mentoring programs, and one of the things was pool safety, water safety. So if we were to suspend our regular operation hours, we could still consider having another organization come in to use it?
They would have to cover the cost of lifeguards.
Okay. Okay, that's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And just for sake of argument, what would be a real dollar proposed savings if we went to that pool scenario?
So on the pool, if we were to make it seasonal, we would be seeing $38,000 a year in savings.
Okay. Well, let me clarify and touch on, since we're at that point, when you're talking about landscaping, are you talking about parks landscaping or parks and rights of way?
It would be parks and rights of way. We have it broken down into two groups. So parks and city facilities. So like all the department buildings are in one listing, and then we have right of ways and medians in another listing.
Do you have a breakdown of those dollars?
Yeah. So currently, parks and city buildings, the current yearly amount is $200,137, and that's at 29 cuts per year. If we reduce it down to 24 times per year, we're looking at $165,600. So that's just reducing it by 5 cuts, and then a deeper one, which would be tougher, would be 18 cuts per year, and that would be $124,000. That's for city properties and parks.
And in the right of way?
The right of way is $181,479 for 29 cuts per year. If we go to 24 cuts per year, it would be $150,190. And if we go to 18 cuts per year, we're looking at $112,642.
Thank you. Well, let me jump in with my opinion on the landscape and the rights of way. If anything, I think we ought to be doing more of that. And our appearance, quite frankly, and particularly this time of year when the grass grows a lot overnight, it's just not appealing. And I think aesthetics are very important, the first impression. And, you know, I'll touch on this later, but I feel as though there are enough unassigned dollars throughout the budget that are called contingencies that we could find a way to maintain at least the appearance we have now in terms of landscape and parks maintenance. And I think we have a long way to go to do better. So I'm certainly not interested, from where I sit, to having any reduction to that expense. If the pool's not being used during the school year and the closure doesn't preclude some special programs, I would be willing to look at that angle as well. It seems foolhardy to have something that's just really not being used in terms of expense. The council?
Here, if I may.
Sure, please.
Thank you. First off, thank you, Carlos and Kate and your team for working on all this budget information for us. And I would also like to thank Carlos for helping me put my daughter to sleep. This is the fastest she's ever gone to sleep. So, when I'm struggling, I'm going to play this budget conference. So thank you.
You're welcome.
I guess your voice is soothing, but thank you. Okay. As it relates to the landscape and mowing, I am not interested in that. I believe aesthetically that will cause a big blow for the city. I think during this season, we're struggling as it relates to the overgrown right-of-ways. So I think that would be a detriment for us if we reduce the frequency of the landscaping and mowing. As it relates to the seasonal pool operation hours, I was initially concerned about that because that pool is located in the Southwest community, and I would hate to scale back that amenity from that community. So when you say during the school year, it's rarely used, what does that mean? Like, how often is it used during the school year?
So during the school year, it's open 7 days a week, Monday to Friday, from 4 to 7 daily, and then Saturday and Sunday from 10 to 6. And it's very minimal use.
Can you quantify that for me?
I would have to get with the vendor to see if we have numbers of attendance. But I can tell you, personally, I've driven by there some afternoons, and I haven't seen anybody in the pool, where the lifeguards are pretty much just sitting in the office.
But what about on the weekend? During the Monday through Friday, perhaps I can live with that. But what about on the weekend? How is usage on Saturdays and Sundays?
Again, I can check with our vendor and get information back to you.
Okay.
And just to clarify one thing on the landscaping, the way we arranged those number of cuts was really reducing it during the winter months. So the summer months would still be getting cut at the same level as currently. Just to kind of put that on the record.
And this is Kate. Maybe something we could look at, Pedro, is a combination of what we initially suggested that would accommodate the weekends and also accommodate any program that Councilwoman Bailey is thinking of. It's not shut down entirely, but we could do sort of just a combination.
I am interested in a hybrid model, but shutting it down entirely during the school year, I'm not sure that I can digest that. But I'm willing to negotiate perhaps the weekend on Saturdays, but just to shut it down during the school year, I'm not really interested in that. As it relates to the millage rates, down here, the 6.2055 mills, that does not factor in the body cameras and the police officers, correct?
That is correct. Thanks, Mayor.
Okay. So why the 10 additional police officers? What was the rationale for that number, 10?
That was kind of a baseline to give an idea of how much 10 would cost and what the millage rate that would be associated with that cost would be. From there, like if you wanted to add 5, we'd know how much the cost would be. If it wanted to be only 5, we'd know what the cost would be. It was just a baseline that was provided.
Because I was looking more so like 5, but 10, I think that's a big jump for now. But let's say if we added the 10 police officers and the body cameras, what would that increase the millage rate to?
The combination for the police officers, the millage would incrementally increase by 0.5114, and for the body cameras, it would be 0.2641. The combination of those two in dollars to a house that would have $100,000 of taxable value would be $77.55.
$77.55.
What's your total now?
Okay. Okay, I yield for now. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And since we've already gone down the road of additional police officers and body cams, let me ask this, though, that there would either necessarily going forward in perpetuity either some other cuts or continued millage rate increases, because within that body cam number every year there are additional staffing costs of about $450,000. Is that correct?
Mayor, yeah, the staffing costs every year, even the same thing with the 10 police officers. Annually, there would be increases if there's merit increases, if any year there's giving COLAs. So usually that's what we try to come up with, at least with the first year, setting the millage rate at what that cost would be. The assumption would be is that with property values continuing to grow, that would probably generate the additional revenues that would cost those future offsets or future increases in wages.
Right. And is it correct that every 2.5 years, new cameras would need to be purchased. They're not replaced for free. It's just every 2.5 years, we're going to have to either budget, either have a fund set aside or raise taxes, raise millage rates to cover that new equipment every 2.5 years. Was that the number in the proposal that I saw?
And the PD can respond to this.
Mr. Mayor, this is Captain Dijon. We would not have to pay for new cameras every 2.5 years. That's part of the package. You would essentially, you're paying for a 5-year package spread out over 5 years, but along the way, every 2.5 years, the officers get a refresh of equipment. So they get a new camera. It's not an additional. You're already paying for it in that price, but it's not an additional that you have to come up with to buy new equipment. That's already part of the plan, the package.
But in the 5th year, it would be.
In the 5th year, no, you get a refresh then. You get a refresh, and then if you renew from there, you'll continue on every 2.5 years. But it's my understanding, as explained to me during the presentation, is that at 2.5 years, every officer that's got a camera will get a refresh. At 5 years, they'll get a refresh and a refresh of a taser. And then if we continue on after 5 years, again, it'll be every 2.5 years, and then at the 10th year.
But it's so. I guess my question is, at what point are we going to have to fund the provision of new equipment?
After 5 years, but you get that last refresh at 5 years. That is part of the current package you would be paying.
Okay.
So, and that's just to continue on. You own the cameras. You don't have to. If we had the system and we decided to walk away from Action Taser, we have the cameras. It's owned by us when it's over. But you start to lose access to certain programs and software if you're no longer paying for it because you're paying for the license.
Okay. All right. Different subject. At what point would we need to hire additional support staff due to an increase of sworn officers?
Well, the additional support staff as far as the body cameras?
No. I'm talking about changing subjects here, going from body cams to adding officers on the street, the sworn officers. At some point, there's a tipping point where if you add X number of new officers, you're going to have additional civilians or non-sworn officers in the station house to help support those additional boots on the ground. At what point does that happen? I mean, I don't think this 10 budgeted item for 10 potentially contemplates any additional other support staff.
No, sir. I don't see it as being at 10 officers that you would have to have additional support staff. Maybe as you're getting at 20 officers, 25 officers, absolutely, you have to have additional support staff. But at 10, no, I think we can manage with the support staff we have, although the support staff we have is wearing many different hats. And they do a tremendous job at what they do. But we could manage with the 10 additional officers, manage with what we have.
Okay. So I guess that kind of answers my next question. I think in the body cam proposal that's been circulated, the preferred one provides for three employees to act as support staff for the body cams. And is what I'm hearing that we would need to hire new people to do that, or reallocate people and then replace those positions, that we could not put that additional burden on our existing staff base, I guess is my question. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct, sir. You would have to hire the additional personnel. Obviously, the positions that we ask for is a sergeant, a detective, and a civilian administrative person. As far as the sergeant detective, that would be up for promotions or reassignment, but it would fill we would have to hire to backfill those vacancies.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Council members?
Mayor, if I may?
Yes, sure. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
evening.
Good evening. So I do absolutely agree with the mayor and vice mayor with regards to keeping our grass cut. The aesthetics of Homestead really have to stay up to par, and I do agree we should be cutting more than less. Have we actually reduced the cuttings as an attempt to try to find savings since COVID started, if I can ask?
No, there have not been any reductions.
Okay, so then
Just
the
more
tall,
rain.
just more rain. Okay, so the tall grass that I saw the other day, which I meant to report this week, is just a matter of natural course, and we
Yep.
should be cutting more often. And I think that we have to try to find other areas to sacrifice. With regards to the pool closures, I can see how that would provide us with a savings, and I do think it's an opportunity for us to maybe partner with other organizations to bring the programs to the pool to offset the cost of the lifeguards, and I look forward to exploring that with some of our community partners. I'll be happy to join Councilwoman Bailey in that effort. I was in conversations with the YMCA with regards to some of the programs they bring out to the community to teach water and swimming safety, which specifically would impact the African American community, which my understanding is about 64% have little to no swimming ability, according to the statistics they provided. So I think that it would be a detriment to not have the pools available and open during the school year to take advantage of the weekends and spring breaks and other off seasons. So I'm on the fence with how we can approach that, but I think there is opportunity to look into other options. And with regards to the cameras, I'm in agreement with the cameras. I think that it's important to recognize that our police department has done a phenomenal job with how they've handled the citizen calls and complaints. There's only been 86 complaints out of 234,000 calls for service since 2015. And I think those are great numbers, out of which only 5 were in the internal affairs and 16 of them were departmental. And I don't want to see these numbers get worse. And so if we're going to move forward with cameras, I really want to set up our police department for success and make sure they have the men and women to help ensure that quality of service continues to improve and that we can spread the workload appropriately, especially if we're going to be implementing a new camera service and capturing every minute of the day under the officer's duty. And we want them to be 100% to the best of their professionalism. I want to make sure that we're also providing the right workforce, because as it is, I think we're under the national average by 30 officers. So I think 10 is not a bad number. And if it's only adding 0.5114 to the millage, I think it's reasonable. So those are my thoughts for now, but I'll defer for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Council?
Okay, Mayor, may I chime in, please?
Sure, Mr. Ross.
Thank you. With regards to the landscaping and mowing, just a couple of years ago, I think we actually increased the number of cuts per year. I know out in the Villages Park, Audubon Park, we're constantly battling with high grass out there. I haven't received any complaints this year, but I walk through there occasionally, and one day it'll look like it just got cut, and the next day it looks like it didn't get cut. So it does grow quite frequently out there. But in addition to the number of cuts per year, the trimming of trees, hedges, maintaining landscaping. I know I've called on the Maori Strip and the Washington Strip to have those maintained. The Washington Strip, I believe we planted in those trees and those hedges a couple of years ago too. And it's a shame to drive through there and see the overgrowth. And I don't think it's our staff, but I think we need to follow up more with the vendor who's in charge of maintaining those areas, especially Mallory from US 1 to Flagler, which is basically the entryway into the downtown area. And when it doesn't look aesthetically pleasing, you kind of drive through there and say, well, where am I going? You know, they can't even they can't even keep the roadway looking nice and neat through there. So aside from the landscaping and cutting that stuff, I think we need to look at it more as an aesthetic thing, work with the vendor, and try to enforce more so. I'm not sure what who's in charge of enforcing the landscaping and monitoring the number of cuts, the trees that need to be trimmed, the hedges that need to be trimmed. I even know along, and it's not our responsibility yet, but North Canal, I have to call our Public Works Department to get the county to come out and trim that wild grass that keeps growing and obstructing the view. So I think that's something we could look at. The pool, I'm not so concerned with if it's not being utilized, but I'm sure you guys can work out some kind of plan. If we do need to have some swim safety classes out there, teaching kids how to swim, those things can all be worked out. Additional police officers, I don't have an issue with the additional police officers. Body cameras, I don't have an issue with that, but more so with the body cameras, I often look at, is there truly a need for additional equipment based on, complaints, any actions that were taken, any officers that acted inappropriately, to spend $770,000 a year when it's not totally 100% necessary. Will it save a life? It probably will. But the police department, and maybe somebody from the police department can go over the actual complaints of anything that has happened that was serious, such as, a police officer abusing someone on the street, anything that's happened in the last 5 or 6 years that would truly warrant spending that kind of money on body surveillance for police officers. I guess that would be, Dejan, would you have some, would you clarify? Or?
You guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, how you guys doing? Yeah, I'll clarify it a little bit. If you look at what was sent to you in the past 5 years, we have had the 23 PCB cases, but out of those years, only 5 were internal affairs cases. 16 of those cases were departmental investigations. What does that mean? Well, that means that 5 serious crimes or violations of state statutes, but 16 of those cases were from within the department, were investigations that the chief ordered in regards to something that came from it shows the level of policing that the officers are doing and the level of integrity that they're holding each other for. Those 6 are issues that have come to light of the chief of police, where the chief of police has ordered the Professional Compliance Bureau to conduct an investigation for facts and well below the average of other police departments in regards to their complaints.
Okay, so I mean, if you didn't put body cameras out this year, you could easily bring in 5 new police officers, and then we could think about doing this again next year. In light of, and I'll listen to other people's, thoughts about this. sometimes it's a need. You know, you really, really, really need it. I mean, I have a lot of faith in our police department. It doesn't sound like we've had any real issues in the last 5 or 6 years. You know, it's just, and with the issues that we had, it'd be interesting to know if the body cameras were available, would have changed the outcome. I just think the expense is a little high for something that's maybe not needed. I mean, if it's just a symbol of what's going on today in our society, then do we do it just because society's, screaming for it? I don't know the answer to that. But to sit here and think about the financial responsibilities that we're facing right now and the true need of this type of equipment, although I would love to see that we had that type of equipment, I don't know that it's financially responsible at this time.
And Mr. Roth, if I may, just to clear it up a little bit, out of those 5 cases that I was talking about, the internal affairs case, those cases in the police department that I'm sure anybody who watches the news is now in tune. Those cases are in the hands of the state attorney's office, where the police department acted. They were actually caught by the cameras in our booking room, for one, and including the officers that pretty much felt uncomfortable with what occurred and reported it to their superiors. That level of policing is unheard of in most places, but we do have it here in the city of Homestead.
No, I get that, Mo, and I appreciate that, and you all know how I feel about the police department. For now, Mayor, I'll step aside and listen to more.
Thank you, Councilman Roth. Thank you, Sergeant Rouse.
Yeah, go ahead. Who's calling me?
This is Pedro.
Hey, Pedro.
One more thing to note, that Maori strip that you identified, they had it classified as hedges, and hedges are only done once a month. So we've been working with them actually within the last couple of weeks to kind of reclassify that, because now due to COVID, we lost our inmates since March. So we've been reduced 5 crews. I usually use them throughout the summer to kind of, I guess, help the overgrown areas, or like the hedges. Since we know they're only once a month, we tackle them more times with the inmates. So this summer's been a little different because of that. Just wanted to put that out there.
I get that. But that Maori thing, and I appreciate you guys went out there and took care of that. That hadn't been touched in several months, so maybe it's a vendor issue. If the vendor is responsible for going out every month and cleaning those beds out, there's not really hedges in there. It's more like, I don't know, like some kind of
those aloe trees, yes,
aloe plants or something, and then you get the weeds growing up to clean them, and it starts to look a little, it's not aesthetically pleasing. So, and maybe it's more of having someone just follow behind the vendor and getting a schedule for the vendor so we can follow up and see exactly what it is they're cutting each week. They're supposed to be trimming hedges every month. That's kind of, that's something to look at. And I mentioned this a little bit before, and I'm not sure, maybe you can answer this, Pedro, or not, but the north side of North Canal is beginning to encroach into the roadway. I don't know if that's our responsibility or if that's Miami-Dade County until they turn that road over to us. But all of that wild, tall grass that grows, and it's like really tall stuff, it's beginning to encroach into North Canal from the north side. So maybe somebody can take a ride out there and look and see what we're seeing.
It's currently under the county's vendor's responsibility until they turn it over to us, and then we'll have to add that to the landscaping contract. Again, previously we were, because the county has not been taking care of it. We would send the inmates out there, and we haven't had the inmates to be able to send out there.
Yeah. Well, every time I call, they do cut, but it's unfortunate. I have to drive through there and call every time it needs to be cut. You would think that they would see it, but it is what it is. But thank you, Mayor. I'll save some time for later.
Thank you, Councilman Roth. Appreciate it. Before we continue, and pardon the pun, let me get out into the weeds for a minute. and I'll just say this for staff, I noticed that when early voting started, the rights of way of the yard at the community center already needed to be mowed, and it still needs to be mowed, and we're going to have voting there next week as well as early voting there for the rest of this week. And for me, it's kind of embarrassing because almost everybody who's standing for election, from Congress all the way down to local party board seats, have come through our facility, and it really didn't look good. It was kind of ratty looking. So maybe now that all the signs have been taken out of the right of way, if we can get that mowed and have it looking better for the rest of the week and election day, I would appreciate that. So back to the budget, council members.
Mayor?
Yes, Councilman Shelley.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I'm gonna address it a little bit differently. I know we've been kind of addressing individual issues. I think I'm going to talk more philosophically versus addressing kind of some of the stuff we've done individually here. And that is, I think that for me, I guess the biggest question is whether or not philosophically we all are comfortable with pulling from reserves in order to balance this particular and next year's budget, I guess, for that matter as well, given the unexpected COVID impacts that have occurred to the state budget and likely will next year as well. If we're lucky, maybe this thing returns around faster and next year's losses won't be as bad as this year's losses, but they could also, I guess, be worse. And then hopefully we start to emerge out of that going forward if all goes well. But so I think that's kind of the first question for me, is whether or not I'm philosophically comfortable with a reserve, pulling from the reserves. I think the answer to that is yes. I think that's a philosophy that we as a council have adopted over the last couple of years, even still spanning back from the last downturn. It was, did we want to potentially hurt our residences and put the financial burden on them by raising the millage rate and raising taxes in order to level off the hole that we were in back then? And the answer then was no, we wanted to kind of work our way out of it, which was successful. Last year having the first balanced budget since that last downturn. Unfortunately, we were met with another downturn much faster than I think we all would have hoped for. And so now we're faced with kind of a similar circumstance again, where we do have reserves in which we can continue to take that burden off of our residents' shoulders when they are also out there facing similar economic downturns, some of them unemployed, they've gone out of business. And so again, I think our residents are looking to see, whether or not we end up raising the millage rate, which effectively raises taxes on them at a economically disadvantaged time for most of our residents, or do we decide to pull from our reserves and keep the millage rate the same and ultimately take the burden on the city's shoulders and pull from the rainy day fund? And I'm comfortable doing that, but I raise that because if we don't pull from the reserves, then I think some of the cuts that we're talking about not making or having to make, if we don't pull from the reserves, I think we have no choice but to make every single cut possible in the existing budget, because we're going to have to save every penny, and we're probably going to have to raise the millage rate to ultimately get out of that hole that we're currently in, that $1.8 or $1.9 million gap that we have. So if we don't pull from reserves, that becomes our next option, is we have to cut everything and probably more, as well as raise the millage rate in order to get out of or level off the gap so that we can at least have a balanced budget. And then that kind of ties into the other set of things we're discussing, which is going to require increasing that millage rate. And so I don't think that now, I'm not supportive at this time of raising the millage rate for somewhat discretionary items that we maybe should have and would be good to have in a perfect world if the money was available. But ultimately, to increase the millage rate now for these new items, these new expenses, and again, a time in which our residents, I think, are already facing economic hardship across the board and maybe facing for the next year or more to come, I'm not supportive of increasing the millage rate for new things, whether it be new projects, new initiatives, new police officers. Even though I may ultimately support the underlying project, I don't think now is the time to do that. I think that we, again, need to, if we're going to raise the millage rate, it needs to be in order to solve the current COVID problem, not to necessarily add new items or new expenditures into our budget process for this year or for next year. So that's kind of where I wanted to talk about more philosophically on where I was and that kind of, trickles down as we probably get into other minutia of specific cuts and specific items. But overall, I'm okay with pulling from reserves. I'm also okay as long as, again, it's a reasonable amount. I think we should still make as many cuts as we possibly can and have that pull be the smallest number possible. But I also concur with the philosophical idea of trying to cut as few services that lead to a higher quality of life in our city, whether it be aesthetics or whether it be, services that we're talking about with pools and organizational activities and parks and things of that nature. Again, if we're going to pull from reserves anyways, then at that point it becomes how much are we comfortable pulling from the reserves while trying to balance not affecting the quality life that we may be able to provide to our residents here within the city. So that's kind of my overall philosophical, concept as I'm looking at this budget, and I'll leave it at that for now and reserve for additional comments later. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Very well said, Councilman Shelley. Appreciate it. Did I hear Mr. Fletcher?
Yes, how you doing, Mr. Mayor?
Good. Good evening. And for the record, Mr. Fletcher joined us at about 6 o'clock.
Yeah, it's about 5 after. I'm sorry for my tardiness. I missed most of the presentation, but I have done a little research over the weekend and just wanted to say a couple of quick things. As many of you know, I was on the council back in 1999 and 2000 when we found our city in a very difficult financial condition, where our reserves were depleted completely and we were actually in the red. And there was a plan that was put in place by a group of individuals that the city brought in at that time to help us recover from that, and we recovered rather quickly at that point in time. And if you look back at the millage rate increases, if I can find that slide here again. At some point in time, up till 2006, we were in the 6.75 range, and then we started reducing that. I'm assuming that after the recovery period, we start reducing that and continue with our services without affecting the overall health of the reserve fund. And then, basically for the last 6 years, we've maintained a fairly steady or stagnant millage rate, and our home values have continued to increase, which is good, but at the same time, that does provide somewhat of a tax increase for our residents as well. Nobody here likes to hear the word tax increase. Fundamentally, I'm against the tax increase. However, if we look at some of the things and projects that we have been doing over the last few years, I think, in my estimation, that, we may have outspent ourselves a little bit in order to try and provide the services that the city's here to do. But with that being said, the big additional programs for consideration here, the body camera issue, should my colleagues decide to move forward with that, I will be in full support. However, based on the data that has been provided by the police department, and we've all heard from them several times, that is it really necessary for us to go through that expense right now in order to ensure that we continue on the same path. I believe that our folks at the police department have done a yeoman's job in performing these activities and investigating those issues. But if it comes down to it long term, and we make the decision to move forward with the body cameras, I will be in support of that. But I will also, state that, right now is probably not the right time in our current financial condition. However, with that being said, looking at the additional police officers, this is one of the things that the community has been asking for a period of time, for the last 4 or 5 years that I'm aware of, that we need to support the folks who are out there protecting us on a day in, day out basis. Now, whether it's 10 officers or 5 officers or some, fraction thereof, I think we need to look at doing this in incremental activities in order over a period of 5 or 10 years to increase our force where we need to be long term. I don't think it doesn't all need to be done at one time. Plus, that puts an additional burden on the folks who are working on a day in, day out basis over there. And lastly, I would just like to say that I appreciate the job the staff has done in trying to identify and balance this budget. But just to ask the question one more time, have we looked at every option available to us to ensure we are gaining efficiencies and not costing any additional money to our taxpayers? And I believe the answer is yes, but there's always that second, head turn to take a look at one other thing down the road that might provide that savings to us. With that, I'll yield my time back to the floor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And
Thank you, Councilman Fletcher. Well, and in that vein, maybe this would be a good jumping off point for each of us to go forward with specific questions we had with respect to the budget book that was put in front of us. Before I do that, though, I noticed that one of the major increases in this year's budget and throughout the pages of this budget were increases for police pension expenses. And while, as I understand it, this budget doesn't provide for any raises for any employee across the board, is this increase due to failure to fund fully in the past? Is it due to the stock market conditions where we have a guaranteed gap to fill? Or is it with respect to this $1 million+ in overtime we've spent due to COVID that triggers that obligation, or all of the above?
Mayor, this is Carlos. One, as far as the overtime, not all overtime is pensionable. I think it's only up to like the first 280 hours. With respect to what we always fund the amount that the actuaries calculate that we have to fund. Every year, whatever the actuary calculates, we fund. So as far as underfunding the pension plan, that is not correct. As for the increase, if you follow the stock market, investment, getting anything out of investments, whether it's stocks or bonds, being able to generate revenues from it, it's very difficult. So what's been happening with a lot of the pension plans is that they have been lowering their investment rate of return. When that gets lowered to what is considered realistic, and the state does look at that, then obviously the city's contribution goes up. So that's part of it. Obviously, it's still an open plan, so that one's probably going to continue to possibly increase, as opposed to the general employees plan, which is a closed plan. And at the beginning, you might not have seen the benefits of it, but I think now you start seeing that there have been reductions over the last couple of years with the GE plan. And I think I answered all your questions. If I missed one, let me know.
No, I think you did, but I guess one of my express questions is are we obligated to guarantee a return of X% a year on that pension plan?
If whatever is set as the investment rate of return, that's what the actuary calculates it on. So whatever the investments return don't make, in essence, the city is, as the employer, is on the hook for the difference.
And what's, just for general knowledge, what's that rate of return pegged at now?
I believe it's 7.5, but I could be wrong. If you allow me, I can get back to you on that.
No, that's fine. It just gives me an idea of what kind of gap. That's a pretty significant gap when, a lot of people have been lucky to get 1%, and the stock market tanked in the last several months. And I agree with you. I did note, and one of my questions was, I saw some, significant general employees and elected official pension, significant reductions. And my initial concern was, are we kicking that can down the road? And I think you've answered that with a no, that we're not, that just by virtue of the structure of those plans, our obligations continue to to decrease, yet we protect the pensions of those who are members of those plans. So, let me, and again, I think kind of echoing what some of my colleagues have said and questioned, have we really, cut to the bone without drawing blood, I guess, if that's an appropriate metaphor. I mentioned earlier, there seems to be, well, there is, by my count, about $3.3 million in contingency line items spread throughout the budget. And when you back out the confiscated funds contingencies that probably have greater controls on them that can't be sprinkled around, it still takes us down to about 2.8 of unallocated, other than just being a placeholder of contingency. And I guess I'd like to have staff come back and say, we found, or we believe that we don't need this level of contingency, and therefore that reduces the amounts that we need to draw from the reserves going forward. Having the philosophical conversation.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
This is Carlos again.
Yeah.
I think in the general fund, the only contingency that I know of is a $200,000 contingency in the general administration fund, which we can certainly lower it by maybe another 150. That one is really more for the pleasure of the council, in case during the year the council comes up with something that's not specifically budgeted. We usually use that contingency fund for that. Outside of the general fund, most of the other funds, there are restrictions for those funds and how they can be used. So yes, we may have it as a contingency because we appropriated the funds, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they can be easily used for operations in the general fund.
Okay, and that's good information. Now, for example, and I've got a list here, I jotted down. The first one is the electric utility has a $1.4 million contingency line item.
Yes, sir. And
Would
that
be restricted to those operations.
No, sir, there's a reason for that one, and I think at the next council meeting, the electric utilities director will be doing a presentation. There's a consideration to possibly reducing the PCA to the customers. So in doing that, right now what we budgeted for 2021, the revenues basically exceed the expenditures, and that's why we put that contingency there. But if the PCA is passed on, that would reduce the revenues and thereby eliminating that contingency. There is a specific reason that amount was put in there. So there is consideration for what that's going to be used for.
Okay, and the water and sewer of 645?
What page, sir?
Oh, let me see. I don't know. I just jotted down a separate list of items that were.
Oh, wait, no, I do know, okay. Sir. I do know. Okay, the 6.38 CPI that we are presenting to council, that's included, those revenues are already included. That was really a 2-year CPI because last year the intent was to go to council with the CPI. So in theory, water and sewer is probably going to be expecting a loss this year of about $630,000. So that's why we put that in contingency. We hope that the revenues that we generate for 2021 will not only cover the costs of operations for 2021, but it'll put back some monies back into the reserve. As you know, we need to build up the water and sewer reserve. We've agreed that by doing CPI every year, we will keep the operations in balance. The reserves is something we still have to work on.
Okay. Well, then the last big ticket item would be, I think it's $402,000 and change for Homestead Miami Speedway contingency.
Yes, sir. That is money that can, now that we don't pay, the debt service is gone. So in the future, the only thing we have to pay, we will continue getting $1 million lease payment. we pay about $600,000 in property taxes. That will continue. The fact that we don't have the debt service, that will generate $400,000 a year, and that absolutely can come back to the general fund. Unfortunately, with the 5.7 still being up in the air, that is part of the monies that we're using for the plan to fill the gap. So once that comes in, that money would be available.
Okay. So that's good to know going forward as the monies that are being administered by the county and by FEMA come into us. We do have some flexibility, at least as for that amount.
That is correct, sir.
Okay. Thank you. That because that number just jumped out at me. Not that particular number, but just adding up all of those line item contingencies.
That one is certainly a good thing and something that we can use. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. And again, the best, from my perspective, the best practice would be to wait until those other disaster relief monies are reimbursed to
yes,
us.
sir.
We'll see where we
absolutely
we can go with that. And no, I don't think anyone has expressly said it yet. So if not, let me be the first to say I support the cuts that you are proposing to mayor and council budget for both the current year and next year. So, did I hear the Vice Mayor trying to chime in?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay, actually, I was going to mention that also. I forgot to mention it earlier. I completely agree with the cuts from mayor and council. I believe it's fair. If everyone's going to take cuts, I believe we should have taken the first cut. So I'm completely in agreement with the cuts from mayor and council. I also wanted to double back with body cameras. I remain committed to body cameras, and I thank the police department for sending the data from 2015 to 2020, but I wanted to be clear that the need for body cameras wasn't necessitated by any infractions that previously occurred or a spike in investigations. The body camera conversation was not necessitated because of that. And when I saw the email come through, I figured that would kind of skew the conversation, but it didn't skew my view on the need for body cameras. I believe that it's best to be on offense and not defense, be proactive as opposed to reactive. That data, quote unquote, may not necessitate a need for body cameras, but it's very important for us to be ahead of the curve and not bringing up the rear. So I remain committed to body cameras, as well as 5 additional police officers instead of the 10. I think we have an incredible police force, and I believe the body cameras will increase transparency and accountability and will continue to propel our police force to, even higher levels of professionalism. So I remain committed to body cameras, and I am willing to move forward with 5 additional police officers. There is a national cry for body cameras. There will be legislation on the county level, perhaps. I know the state level, I know the federal level for body cameras, and I want Homestead to be in a position to be ahead of the curve and not behind the curve. So I remain committed to body cameras. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Thank you. Carlos, if I might, and I won't belabor it as long as I did a month ago, I just wanted to hit a couple of things that jumped out at me in the budget.
Yes, sir.
To have a better understanding of what they are and how they came to be. You and I are working from the same book, so when I reference a page, we're not going to have a conversion table.
I hope so, sir.
Well, that was my fault. Okay, page 17.
Hold on. Okay, I'm there.
Okay, about halfway down, we've got a line item for professional services and management and consulting fees. And the professional services dropped from $267 to $15.7. How is that? And give me a real world example of what that's for.
That's the election, sir.
Gotcha. Okay. And then the management and consulting fees at $35.
Give me a second.
Is that like for filming and?
I believe, yes, I believe so. Give me 1 second. Yes, video recording of the town council meetings. That's correct, sir.
Okay, so that's 24 meetings a year, more or less. Or would that include charter review and other special committee meetings and these workshops?
I believe it's only council and the Cal meetings.
Okay, all right. So any other meetings would be above and beyond that. Okay.
Possible we can check on that and get back to you, sir.
Okay, all right. And then a little bit further down, advertisements at 25,000. Is that legal advertising, legally required advertising, or is that the frou-frou stuff? Happy New Year, Merry Christmas, don't blow your hands off at the 4th of July kind of thing, or is that both?
Sir, I believe that is all just legal requirements from the city clerk. I don't think it's any happy.
Yeah, I know, because, well, and I just wonder where those ads are funded from, the Happy 4th of July, Happy New Year, so on and so forth. And I've done a lot of
that's from the 1800 division, the general administration, under the marketing account.
Okay, all right. I guess I'll get to that. Okay, so moving right along. Your department, page 20. Contract outside temp for 40,000. I guess that speaks for itself. It's just one temporary employee.
Yes, sir.
Employee?
Yes, sir. It started off when we needed to cover for central cashier because that office always had to be open. So then we ended up losing a person that had to be frozen, and that individual actually has filled in tremendously for us. While we're still doing without that full-time person. So.
Okay. All right. And now here, general services on page 24, you've got $110,000 for temp.
There's two, right? There's the help desk. When anybody has an issue with any IT issue, that's the individual that they call. And then there's I believe another person that goes around whenever anybody physically goes to check computers. Like I've experienced that. Whenever I have any issues, this individual is usually the first one that comes out and checks everything out for us.
So those are two part-time people doing entirely different.
They're contract temps. They're contract temps, not part-timers.
Gotcha. All right. Moving on to, I guess, general administration, the management and consulting fees of $406,000.
Yes, sir. That's primarily lobbyists. We have federal lobbyists, state lobbyists, county lobbyists. We also our EOC managers also paid out of there. And there's a longer list. I can go through it if you need to.
I'd like to see an itemization of who feeds at that trough and for how much. I mean, I acknowledge it's reduced by about $140,000. That's still a lot of money.
Yeah, and two of the reductions, Mayor, so that you know, two of the reductions are for the Main Street contract, which was shifted back to the CRA. That was $35,000 out of management consultant and $15,000 out of special events, and then $25,000 for the historical museum that was also shifted over to the CRA.
Okay. So that money didn't go away. It's just somewhere else in the budget.
That one shifted. Yeah, we did reduce it. Though we had some miscellaneous because, as you know, again, during the year you might have something that you didn't think of, and you may have to do a study. But that was lowered by about $41,000. So.
Okay. On that same page, 25, we've got three items: marketing, PR, and special events.
Yes, sir.
Talk to me about what that encompasses.
Well, let me start with one simple one. The PR, the primary reason for the deduction on that was we had $60,000 there for a career source of South Florida, which was supposed to be for a summer youth program. So that's been basically unfunded and this year and for 2021. Special events, again, like I said, it was reduced for $15,000 for Main Street. It also includes a $20,000 reduction for the amount of Christmas lights that are put up. I'm thinking maybe doing something else for 2021.
Okay, so what would we be doing with the 99 that's still there? Especially with that.
One second. Okay, actually, the items that are in there, the state of the city address, which is for you, Mr. Mayor, 25,000.
If we ever get to sit in the same room again.
The MLK breakfast, 8,000. Jingle Bell Run, 10,000. 4th of July event is budgeted in two places. Part of it's here, part of it's in parks, but the portion that's budgeted here is $12,000. We've reduced the holiday lights from 44 to 24. There's a Thanksgiving dinner and turkey giveaway for $5,000 and Military Appreciation Day, $15,000. That makes up the 99.
Okay, thank you. Easy enough. Moving on to page 27, do we still have people in line for tuition reimbursement? I guess repeat or ongoing?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that money does get used up quite a bit in the past. If you notice, look in 2019, it was actually 45,000. We budget 35 every year, so it does go. Most of the time, it actually goes beyond that amount that's budgeted.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to page 28. Second line, part-time wages of $80,000. Not identifying who. Help me understand what how many, what they do in administration that's part-time.
I'm going to have to defer to the police department on that one. That's a little bit more operational than I know.
Mr. Mayor, this is Captain Dijon. I can address that. It's one position in PCB that is funded. It's a part-time position. And it's only that one position.
And it's one person. Okay.
Yes, sir.
That almost sounds like a full-time job then.
Yes, sir. As far as the hours is not completely, and I believe he may use some of the reserve time as well to meet some hours, but it's not, that portion is not paid.
Okay. And I guess I have the same question over on page 29, the part-time wages entry, the $51,000.
That is also a position of for an evidence technician, crime scene technician. It's an experienced detective, retired, and he continued on to provide services for the police department because of his wealth of knowledge and experience. And he's a tremendous asset to the department itself.
Okay. Now, and if you said so, on the one on page 28, is that also a retired officer?
Yes.
Okay.
No, both of those positions have no benefits whatsoever.
No, I understand that. Yeah. Then we've got here, page 32, overtime wages of 660. Or no, I'm sorry. Never mind. Strike that. I'm confusing overtime with part-time. Okay. One thing I did notice throughout the police budget, maybe Carlos, you can help me, or somebody from the police department. Although in this current budget year, we purchased or leased a few vehicles, and we've got 22 in the pipeline. It seems that our overall maintenance and repair expenses continue to climb, notwithstanding that we have a lot of new cars in the fleet.
Mayor, that's a very good question, and we've been addressing that because you're correct. We added the police vehicles based on the CIP plan when we presented it to you, but we still needed to go back and adjust it. So this account specifically, this is where the police vehicles would go. This one's being analyzed. Hopefully it can be reduced, maybe $80,000 or something dollars. We don't know, but we will certainly have that revised before the budget hearings.
Good, thank you.
Very good question. Very good question.
In every segment of the PD, I just seem to be picking up on, you know, and I'm not suggesting that we drive junkers down the road, but thinking in my mind, we've got all these new vehicles. So that's what I wanted to ask about there. Moving right along.
Mr. Mayor, if I may address the issue about the car. It should be known that last year when we ordered 12 vehicles, we never received them due to cease in operations production of the Dodge Charger. So we never actually received those vehicles. So now we're sort of trying to play catch up. In addition, because of the high mileage in the vehicles, vehicles being out of warranty causes more increased expenses in the repairs. So in a sense, we're playing catch up because of that production shutdown by Dodge.
No. I realize that, and I think there was some reallocation there, and that's how we bought some of the other, I think they were Tahoes and maybe some other vehicles that weren't necessarily slated to be bought yet or leased yet, but because of the fact that those cars couldn't be delivered. So, yeah, you know, I recognize that most of the new vehicles are not yet in hand, but we expect them to be in the coming budget year. Okay, so moving on to page 35, same thing, the contract temp at $53,000 in the Special Services Division.
Which page is that, sir?
35.
35. Yeah, that. That's a position that a retired officer was in. He just left, and it's going to be filled with another retired officer that's going to provide a great service to the department.
All right, now leave that to the manager to determine that necessity. Okay, same thing on page 36. We've got $110,000 for contract temps in the support services. Same thing, a retired officer?
No, sir, those are not retired officers. Those are temp employees that we have a person at the front desk that is a temp employee that is a greeter and takes information for somebody that wants to come in and request a copy of the report. And the other one is the Department of Corrections officer that manages the trustees. Now, granted, we haven't had them for the last couple of months because of COVID, but they should be returning once we get past this.
We'll have plenty of catch-up work for everybody to do once we get back out there.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay. I guess a couple of things on page.
But it also should be noted too that that money that is not being used by the trustees right now is converted to a temporary cleaning crew that we're utilizing to maintain the facilities. Okay.
All right. I guess same question on page 38, the contract service temp at $64,500.
That's for some, yeah, that's for summer camps and the inmate crews.
Okay. And then the special event line item would be things if we ever get to have trick or treat again and those kinds of things.
Actually, that excludes the Halloween because of the timing. We don't anticipate that with COVID that event's going to be held. So that's one of the reasons why you see the reduction there.
Okay. All right. So moving on to page 40, we've got $125,000 for temps. About halfway down.
Yeah, just give me a second. Oh, Pool management.
Oh, okay.
That's pool management.
So we've been down that road. Okay. So that number contemplates the change or no?
No.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha. Let's see. All right, and then looking at page 43. Is it safe to assume that the electricity charges that we took care of at the Seminole were under budget this year due to the close down, or was the air still running and things going on?
Mayor, I'd have to see how much we've expended to date so far on that one. I don't know right hand.
Just a thought, because there's a couple of events in November I had tickets for. They go forward. Anyway.
I'm sure you'll get a refund.
Well, I'd rather go to the events. I think that entertainment world is on hold there.
I agree.
And then, okay, I had my questions answered earlier on the librarium. I guess the confiscated, and Carlos, you and I talked about, there's some pretty significant restrictions on the confiscated property uses, contingencies that are held there.
Correct, sir. We budget them so that if the police department during the year there's some kind of a need, but I know that there's Treasury, there's Justice, and there's State, and I know that each one has its own restrictions and guidelines. And for any more specifics on that, I would defer to the police department.
Getting close to the end here, I promise. CRA, I see there's on page 53, I see there's an $80,000 temp there. How many people does that represent?
What page, Mayor?
53.
53.
CRA expenses, Southwest neighborhood, down at the bottom section.
Hold on. $33.30. That's trustee. That's inmate crews.
Oh, okay. Is that for the inmates or for the guys that guard the inmates?
No, sir. That's for the inmate crews.
Okay.
We pay that to the Department of Corrections.
All right. I think very good. I can't wait to have those extra hands again. Okay. Just as a note, I would like to see us in CRA. I'm just saying this for staff's benefit to find a way to reinstitute at least some of the commercial facade efforts and target some very concentrated areas and begin to make real differences in the appearance of blocks of property.
Mayor, I apologize. What you have in the CRA, obviously, I think the CRA director and the manager will probably be meeting with each council member one-on-one to kind of more finalize the CRA budget as more of a programmatic. You're seeing a lot of numbers, but as far as the programs that the CRA board wants to see moving forward, there will be one-on-ones for that. So we'll have that done probably over the next week or so then we can finalize the city's budget that will include the CRA. On September the 8th, the first thing that you will actually have is that the board will see the CRA's presentation and you will approve that budget by resolution, which then eventually gets included into the city's budget.
Yeah, I knew we'd have some separate discussions on that. Looking to page 56, and I know, our portion of the taxes has always been a sticking point. Do we ever have anybody take a look at the assessment out there and file any appeals?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. That was actually, I think that was actually done. Well, at least we initiated it about a year and a half ago. I'd have to check, but yeah, that discussion did come up, and I think we were pursuing it. I don't know if it was eventually dropped or not. I would have to check my record, sir.
In light of the fact that I understand 15,000 seats have been taken out, and that we no longer have the big race, and that facility in part, I'm assuming, is assessed based on the income approach rather than just the value of dirt and bricks and mortar. It would seem that in this year we have a pretty good shot at a significant reduction, given the refocus of their use, as well as the reduction of potential ticket sales by virtue of the removal of the seats that were done, I think, right at the end of last year, so that they would be off the tax rolls the first of this year. So just a thought.
I mean, there would be the savings, right? The savings portion would be the portion that we pay that goes to the county, because obviously we get a lot of that, back anyway. It's paid from here, but it goes to the general fund. So.
No, I know we do get our portion back, but hey, every little bit this year, right?
Yes, sir.
Little bit. All right. I think that is a lot of mine have answered my questions. I know that we, have things in the work to reduce some of the card fees and financial service fees that are incurred to the city, which could make a big difference.
Which one?
The credit card. Oh, the credit. You're talking about the credit card charges. Yes, sir. That's going to be coming in on October.
Will likely be incorporated in the final version, so that will be a big issue. Now, again, and finally, just to clarify, this budget does not, as proposed, does not provide for any paid increases across the board, correct?
No COLAs. Merit increases by union contract would still apply, but there is no cost of living adjustment. That's correct at this time.
Yeah, but is this a year for contract renewal?
The contract actually, yes, 9/30 of 2020, it would end, yes.
Okay. And generally speaking, we've had, let's say for sake of argument, an increase of about $550,000 a year in health insurance premiums, and none of that has been passed on in any manner whatsoever. We being the city is guaranteeing that the taxpayers are providing that benefit. Is that a fair assessment?
That's correct, sir. Nothing's been no additional costs have been passed on to the employees.
Right. And again, I know we've come a long way since the first conversations we had that were far bleaker than the shortfalls that we had anticipated for not only this year and next year. So, I want to expressly commend everyone for the work they've done and to bring us a decent budget without in reality raising the millage rate. So thank you. Council members?
Mayor, I have one.
Yes. Is that Mr. Rowe?
Yes. Thank you. The impact fees kind of concern me, and because we're off by a little over $3 million in revenues to the city. Can somebody explain what those impact fees come from, and is there a way for us to get it back up to the levels that we were at before?
Councilman, this is Carlos. Part of the reason, yes, part of it was because of projections that were made, that we thought we'd be getting more than we did. But another part of the reason why you're seeing the reduction is at least the $1.7 million that's in there for, which is reported in impact fees. It's the art in public places that's expected to be expended for the cyberarium, and if not, it will be reappropriated. So that's a big chunk of the amount of money that you're looking at. As far as increasing impact fees, you would have to do my understanding, it's a significant study that has to be done if you were planning on changing the impact fee structure. That is not just something that the council can say we want to increase it. I believe it's a significant study that would have to be done before it can be approved.
Yeah, I didn't mean to increase the rate at which we collect. It's where are those impact fees derived from, and is there an opportunity for us to increase the applicants that are applying that pay those impact fees?
I really don't know how to answer that. I can tell you that one of the developments, though, that came in was and maybe Development Services can help me, but they were in a DRI section of the city where they were exempt from paying parks impact fees, and maybe Development Services can step in and discuss that a little bit more.
It just stands out because it's a $3 million hit to the budget, which we would be in a position if we had that extra $3 million to not increase millage rates and to increase the police force and possibly add the cameras as well without even hitting the reserves. So it's just an interesting thought or question that it's been reduced by $3 million. The PAC fund, whatever, that money is there, and it will be, I guess, used for the cyberarium in the future. But that's what I really wanted to figure out is what's affecting the $3 million+ change from previous year. I mean, that's a lot of money. Anybody?
Mayor and Council, this is Michelle Lopez with Development Services. So just to give you some background on the information that Carlos just provided, developments that are approved in the DRI do not pay certain impact fees like road impacts, because the DRI, especially when it was created in 1975 and it built the roads, it in essence it vested those future impacts. So projects like the recently approved Keys Gate 3, 770 units, they don't pay road impact fees. And so that is, you won't see that increase in the impact fee revenue.
Okay, so are we looking at a future decline in impact fees as something we need to plan for in the future? Anybody?
Again, impact fees are only for new developments, so it's hard to predict those, and you can only use them for expansions and additional equipment. You can't use them for operations.
Okay, so they're not part of the general fund?
No, not at all. That's why they're a separate fund. They have restrictions on them. Sorry, Councilman, my fault for not making that clear. No, there are restrictions on impact fees on how they can be used. They usually can only be used for improvements, betterments, not for replacement of existing things. Those are considered operational in nature and would have to be coming out of the general fund. I apologize for that.
No, it's okay, and that clears that up for me because that I'm looking at $3.5 million, but it doesn't affect actually what we're actually talking about. So there you have it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman. Madam Manager, I'd ask you, what do you need from us tonight in addition to the input we've already provided? Do you need an action?
Well, actually, Mayor, what I wanted to do is just kind of summarize some of what has been spoken about and also go back to the slide for council consideration, because I'm not sure what direction that the council wants to take with respect to body cameras and police officers. Two council people have made it very clear what they want, but I'm unsure of if there's a consensus in that regard. And then there's some miscellaneous things I just want to go over to make sure that everything you do want us to bring back, we have. But that is right now something that we need a little bit more information on.
Tracy?
Mayor,
Yes, Councilwoman.
thank you. May I ask when was the last time we increased our police force? Do you have Captain on the line?
PD, can you answer that? I mean, we're looking on our end, we can check, but you might be able to answer it more quickly. While they're looking for, go ahead.
All right, this is Captain Dijon. Our estimate is that it's been at least 6 years ago, maybe longer, maybe as long as 2012, 2013, where we had an increase of maybe 5 officers. That was the only increase that we had since then.
Yeah, we could confirm on that date, Councilwoman, but I believe that's right, it was 5 police officers.
Thank you. On another note, I was advised that our city attorneys may be crunching their numbers as well. Do you have anything on that?
I'm not sure what you mean.
I believe they'll be offering us a reduction in fees, but if it's not been put in writing yet, maybe it's not official, but hopefully there's room there to find some savings.
Oh, well, maybe there isn't anything in writing. I mean, as I had mentioned to Mayor and Council, a letter did go out to all vendors, but there has been nothing established as of yet.
Do we have counsel here?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll speak to this. I, in response to the city's request, I did say that I spoke with the manager earlier, and while we haven't finalized the details, I advised her that the firm would be offering a 10% reduction in its fees for the duration of the calendar year as a way to try to help the city close its budget gap.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Our pleasure.
I have a question.
Sure.
Is there a consensus from council to move forward with the body cameras and 5 additional police officers?
Council members, feel free to weigh in.
Yes, Mayor, thank you.
Yes.
I agree completely. You know, I see and I hear this national cry, and I just wanted it on the record that I've spent a lot of time talking to residents, talking to our police department. And although looking at our data, I believed before that we could use that money more in programming that we desperately need for our children, our seniors, at the PAL or at Michael Williams. But I definitely agree that this is something that we can be proactive with now. So I'm fully supporting it as well. Thank you.
So if I'm not mistaken, Mayor, I think that 2 of the council members are suggesting 5 police officers plus body cameras.
That's what I'm hearing. Mr. Roth, I think we heard earlier that you had concerns about allocating those monies in the upcoming budget year for body cams. Is that accurate?
I have concerns about the expense involved. It's going to increase again, adding new police officers as well. I'm more in favor of the 5 to 10 additional police officers, but I'm also in fear of the additional taxes that are going to be levied on folks. Carlos used the example of $100,000 taxable value, there aren't that many homes in the city that have a $100,000 taxable value. Most of them are quite more than that. And I just happened to pull up a couple of properties in the area on the east side of the city. And including the homestead exemption, their assessed value is $300,000. If it was a $77 per $100,000 increase, you're talking about $200+ to a household that's already paying. And get this, they're already paying $7,131.05 in tax. So now you're increasing it even more. So these are painful times. They're very painful. And for that person who's already paying over $7,000 a year in property taxes, to increase it another $250, I think we still got to look at this a little bit further. I wish we already had the room in the budget to do all of these things without putting an additional burden on people's pockets and wallets. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what the future is going to hold for people who have been furloughed, lost their jobs, what the foreclosure market may look like in the future. The resellability of these properties with a $7,000 a year tax expense on it. I just arbitrarily picked the property. I don't know who these people are. I just picked their property, and that's what came up. That's a single-family home in our city that they're paying, already $7,000 a year in property taxes. It's a 5.3. It's a large home. So I guess you could think the average would go down some. I just have my reservations when it comes to the expenditures. I understand and I appreciate the program. I get it. I understand the peace of mind it gives, people. But I just don't know that it's financially the responsible thing to do this year. I understand the outpouring of people who truly believe in body cameras will help solve some issues, and it will. But I also understand that we have an obligation, to protect the city from a financial disaster. And who knows where this goes? So I just pulled up another property randomly. I'm choosing the east side just because that's the most expensive area in the city. This is a townhouse, 4-bedroom, 2-bath, townhouse, 1,700 square feet. It has a homestead exemption on it. And their property taxes that they pay without an increase, I'm pulling it up as we speak, $5,813. So they're going to push them over $6,000 a year in property tax. I just think that that's something to consider as we consider this budget and these additional services. I'm all for adding the police officers. I just don't know about the cameras at this point. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Roth.
I'd like to speak to some of those points.
Yes,
okay?
sure.
Thank you. So with regards to District 5, which is on the other side of the US 1 and the east side, the tax roll includes the Community Development District, which is the non-ad valorem assessment that's part of those tax bills that you're seeing, which is not to the city, right, to the Stonegate CDD and to the Waterstone CDD. But what I can't see from what I'm seeing in the market, with interest rates falling to the lowest level in 49-year history, and with manufacturing, the ISM manufacturing index rising, jobless claims have fell more than expected last week. to the lowest since the pandemic started, and that's across nearly all states, which suggests labor market improvement. Home prices have increased. It's been a 1% climb, which is the fastest in monthly gains since 2013. Home affordability also has been at the best level for many years. These are statistics in the market. So it suggests that as a nation, we're doing much better in light of COVID. And I don't want to raise the taxes, but if we're going to pursue the cameras, now would be the time to do it because of the national outcry and because the community wants it. Now, if there's a change in the community opinion between now and then, maybe that's something we need to all take note of and make it part of our decision. Well, we should, not maybe, but we should take note of it. So perhaps we should have two proposals, one with the cameras and one without the cameras to consider. But the one with the cameras, I would like to see the 10 officers in that budget. I think that having 6+ years of not having an increase in our police force, and then adding this new regulation with cameras, I think it's necessary. And I have a question with regards to once our fund balance is up to 10 million, which I think is phenomenal. I can't believe we got it that high with this estimate. And it looks like it might be higher if we keep crunching more numbers. Is there an opportunity to dip into those funds to bring back some of the programs and bring back some of the things we're taking away, or do we have to readjust the budget?
As far as some of those programs, we could consider bringing them back if the funds are there. If that's something that can be considered, but obviously we would have to take it back to council. They would ultimately have to approve having to use any funds out of fund balance if we're amending the budget. So.
Was that it for now, Councilwoman?
Well, I think that I'm in agreement that we need to do more community outreach to really finalize my position on whether or not the increase in the budget for these particular items is merited and wanted and desired. I think that based on the conversations I've had so far, there are, but now we've got numbers in front of us on paper. We need to do more research and before we can make a final decision. So can we get 2, if not 3, budgets to approve to decide between?
Councilwoman, this is Carlos again. Just to be clear, when you were asking about the fund balance, you're talking about things that we've been cutting out, like reducing lights and stuff like that. You're not talking about funding body cameras or 10 police officers out of fund balance, correct?
No, correct.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to be clear on that, because for that you need the recurring revenues coming in to cover those recurring expenditures. So, as far as proposals of 3, we wouldn't be able to propose 3 different things. I mean, the idea is to get consensus tonight as to what we bring together as staff and the council that we present for the public to discuss. That's the idea, to leave tonight with a consensus of a budget that both the council and staff agree on, and then we leave it to the public. They can chime in at the public hearings, and if they don't want to be taxed, then they can decide they don't want it. But what are we proposing? That's what we need consensus and guidance.
Okay, so if we propose it with the cameras and the 10 officers, then we can reduce that again later, though, at budget hearing. Correct?
I'm a little confused. I think as Carlos suggested, if there's consensus, whether it's with 5 police officers only, 10 police officers only, or 5 police officers plus body cameras, we're hoping that there's consensus so that we can bring one budget to the public hearing. And yes, of course, at the hearing, at the first reading, you could change it, but we would be bringing a proposed millage based on the consensus we get this evening.
Okay, so then I would propose that we bring a budget that's all-inclusive based on the cameras and the 10 police officers. And then at the budget hearing, we can either approve that or modify that based on the additional community input we receive.
We will proceed as the council wishes.
Mr. Roth, I see your name popping up on my screen. Did you need to chime in?
No, I left it off mute, but I'm going to listen a little bit longer before I say anything else. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone who normally sits to my left on the dais wish to chime in on the pending discussion and request from the manager?
So, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilman Fletcher.
Yes, thank you. So I tend to agree with Councilwoman Avila on this. Let's move forward with the proposed budget for the body cameras and the 10 officers. We'll see what those numbers look like, and we can have that discussion with the public at the next meeting. I believe it's very important for us to have these open meetings so everybody gets the time to ensure they get their community buy-in for moving forward, especially with the tax increase. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Fletcher.
Mayor,
Councilman Shelley.
I reiterate my early philosophical position, which is, I support the police, I support the body cameras, but I don't support raising the millage rate to accomplish that. So if staff has some way or can find some way to make room in the existing budget without raising the millage rate, then I'm all for it. But I don't support adding new things to our budget by raising the millage rate. So my position is still the same as it was before. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Shelley. Madam Vice Mayor.
Yes, I will support Councilwoman Avila's. I guess that's a proposed motion. So I would support her and Councilman Fletcher with their position.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Let me chime in on this issue. I tend to lean toward the position of Councilman Shelley in that these are dramatic additions to the budget in a very tough year. I support body cams, and it's my belief that no matter who wins the national election, there will be monies flowing from Washington, D.C. to cities of our size to help us fund those systems. But it's not just that upfront cost. It's $450,000 plus a year after year, just to staff that backup equipment. And I know that we have people who are housed in the police department who are top notch at finding grants and finding other monies to buy equipment. And I acknowledge that body cams are evolving and will be a necessary and required piece of equipment in the next 12 to 24 months across the board. I old enough to remember when not every police officer had a bulletproof vest. That some departments had it, some didn't. Now they wouldn't think of leaving home without it. And I think that's where we will be with body cams. And I understand the emotion, and I understand the justice issue, but I also have to recognize the dollars and cents issues, not in just this year, but ongoing. And when we talk about hiring new police officers, let's remember, built into that, are we going to hire, and I'm just pulling this number out of the air, 10 new police officers plus 3 new staff members to provide support for the camera system? Or will it be 7 officers and 3 staff people that year after year after year, our police pension obligation will continue to accrue and compound every year. And while I do not disagree that more police officers are needed, I think we really need some guidance as to what the overall needs are. And I understand that the most popular measure seems to be that with a population of X, we need police officers of Y. But I think we also need to recognize and admit that a huge part of our population growth, common sense tells me, have far fewer calls for service, burglary, theft, etc., within the gated communities that constitute most of our new population. Yeah, we're still going to have traffic. We're still going to have public area issues. But I think that is just one factor of this analysis. And when I went through the comprehensive annual financial report, that's the latest one available for 2019 for Homestead, I noticed that in 2014, there were 41,245 calls for services and about 4,100 total arrests. So arrests were about 10% of total calls in 2014. Fast forward to 19, where our population has had a significant increase. Our calls for service, according to our own audit, went from 41,200 to 34,149. So despite the increase in population, the calls for service went down, and the arrest as a percentage of calls for service went from 10 to about 7.5 or 8%. So I am not going to solely focus on population as a determinant of the number of total police officers we need in the big picture. But here's a real concern I have tonight, going through the numbers and having them be confirmed by a member of the police department. We have several positions, highly paid part-time positions within the police department, filled by retirees who had 8 years in the drop program, who collect a really nice retirement and are now being rewarded with these positions rather than moving people that are within the department up into those positions and opening the bottom end of the pipeline for new blood. And that's something the manager is going to have to address with her department director. But that's the concern I have, that we seem to be top heavy and payday heavy with those who need to know when to let go and leave the department so that others can continue to advance and we open up positions at the incoming end of the department. So having said that, I would not support any more than 5 new officers this year. I think that we've got to take a look at more than just the population statistics, and I want to have conversations with the manager about the advisability of continuing to hire, and it's gotten to be a real ongoing practice where we reward loyal retirees with plum positions where they're still collecting that paycheck. And I think it's a detriment to the morale and the experience of the department. So to summarize, 5 is my max for police officers to even consider. And at this time, while I want to continue to pursue whatever other avenues we can pursue to have these the body camera systems funded and in place in the short term, I don't support increasing the millage rate to accomplish that. If you can show me a way to keep the same millage rate and have body cams, I'll be there with you. Thank you.
Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you. I have a lot of faith in the citizens in our city, and I'd be willing to move this along as written, bring it to the public debate period, the budget hearings, and allow the citizens of the city to speak so that we can hear from them, not just going out and selectively speaking to individuals that we may know, but opening it up. We can always adjust it at the first hearing, and then we have the second hearing as well. But I'd be willing, I'm wanting to see what kind of a turnout we'll get, even though it's via virtual meetings, to hear comments, from the public in concerns of the want for body cameras, the need of additional police officers, and the willingness of the citizens who pay the taxes in the city to increase their tax liability to the city for those much needed additional officers and a body camera program if they're choosing that. Nothing is that we do tonight is set in stone, so I'd be okay bringing it to the first hearing and really getting some public input as well. Thank you.
So your position at this point is to bring this budget forward as presented?
Yes, because we do have the ability to change it. But since we're all fixated on really the millage rate increase and the service that the citizens are going to be paying for, I think it's important that we hear from them exactly how they feel. We may not get anybody that comes to the budget hearing, but being that they can sit in their house, sit in their car via mobile or by computer, and I would hope that the city would use social media to announce this is what's going on to increase the participation from the citizens base so that we can get a real, feeling for those who want to participate, what they feel. That's how I feel about it at this moment in time. I don't like the fact that we have to raise millage rates, but I still want to hear from our citizens how they feel about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. And unless I'm mistaken, I'm sensing that there are 4 members of council who would like the manager to bring back a budget with full body cams and 10 new police officers. Is that correct?
Mayor,
Motion.
but Mayor, if I, just as a point of clarification, that's my understanding as well. But I just, to the mayor's point, when the mayor asked the question if the 10 police officers include the 2 sworn personnel required for the body cameras, I just would want some clarification on that. Or the body cameras as is plus 10 police officers.
If I may?
Vice Mayor, sure, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Actually, when you brought that up, I was like, that's a good idea. As opposed, I was willing to go down to 5, and I'm still willing to do that if that is the will of the majority. I'm just trying to meet in the middle. But when you mentioned, would it be 10 police officers and then the 3 extra positions, perhaps with 5 police officers and the 3 additional positions for the body cameras, I think that's a good meeting in the middle. And when you mentioned that, I felt that was a great idea. So I am willing to move forward with 5 or 7 police officers with the 3 positions and body cameras. So I'm willing to be flexible here to achieve the same goal of body cameras and additional police officers, be it 5, 7, or reluctantly 10.
But Vice Mayor, that the 3 positions, one is the civilian personnel, so that would be you wouldn't have to reduce it by 3. It would be only by 2. So it would be 8 plus the civilian plus the
Okay,
equipment.
I'm willing to go down to 5 if that'll move forward. Like I mentioned, I'm flexible here. I'm willing to meet in the middle to achieve the goal. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Mayor, may I step for 1 second, please?
Certainly, Councilman Roth.
Okay, just so I understand, the 3 additional people, they're not included in the $777,000. So where are the additional 3 coming from besides those 3? Because it's already.
My understanding is it is included.
That's correct.
So you don't have to subtract any from the 10 when it comes to the additional police officers, because that additional 3 was already included in the original fee for the $777,000.
Yeah, Councilman Roth. Just to be clear, the $779,000 includes the equipment. It includes 2 police personnel and a civilian. That's one item. That's the $779,799. Then you've got the $1.5 million. That is for 10 police officers.
Okay, so I just wanted to be clear. We're not adding 3 on top of 3. The 3 are already included.
Okay. The $1.5 million is 10 police officers. That's one cost. The body cameras, when we talk about body cameras, we're saying all inclusive. It's not only the equipment, but it's the staffing. So in that $779,000, equipment and the staff of 3, 2 of which are sworn police personnel and 1 civilian. So it's a total of 13 staff members that you are adding with both of those projects.
Right. So we wouldn't have to reduce the number of officers because the staffing, the 3 that have been mentioned, are already included. Is that a yes or a no?
The 3 that are mentioned are, if we keep these 2 totally separate, the body camera number includes 3 new people, 2 new police officers and a civilian. So the total number of new people coming with 10 police officers plus the body cameras as presented would be 13, 12 of whom are sworn personnel.
Okay, so we don't need to reduce the number of officers to make up for the other 1.
No, sir, we do not. That's correct.
We can go with 10 officers and the body cameras, and that would be it. We don't have to worry about anything else. We don't need to reduce the number of officers to make up for the other 1.
Not if you had 10, you would have 8 new.
I understand.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that everybody else understands. We're not adding anything to this. We're simply accepting it the way they brought it to us, and you would get 10 officers on this plan, and you would get the body cameras with the supporting staff.
Which is 2 more officers.
Correct.
And Councilman Roth, to further give clearance when you're saying what's brought before you, the budget book that you have in front of you and the presentation that we made does not include these costs in that budget. That's why these were being presented. If the consensus is to move forward, and that's what it sounds like for both of these, then we would revise these budget books. We would revise our presentation so that what we're presenting at the budget hearing is included in the budget would be an increase in property taxes for library taxes, for 10 additional police officers, and for the body camera program, which includes 3 additional personnel as well.
Clear. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Carlos?
Thank you. Councilwoman, sure.
Thank you. Carlos, so that would move it from 5.9215 to 6.699 millage, right?
Give me a second. Hold on. Let me get my sheet. Yeah, the all-in would be 6.910. That would include the library tax, the body cameras, and the 10 police officers. Correct. And again, if you back out, I was going to say, and if you back out the library tax portion, which we're saying is a shift, then the impact, we're saying what the impact to a taxpayer with a $100,000 value would be $77.55.
Right, but the millage would go from 6.910 minus, what was the library tax?
0.2840.
2840, which, so that would be 6.626 plus the switchover. But really, it's like 6.626.
The total amount would be 6.9810. That would be the millage rate that we would be presenting that would include all these factors.
But you want that without the library.
Without the library tax, which is 0.2840, then the increase, okay, hold on, sorry. Right, the millage rate without the library tax is 6.6970.
Okay. Okay. And so just to be clear, although I'm in favor of presenting the budget with the 10 officers and the cameras, with the other changes we've discussed here tonight, this is to be an invitation for the community to provide its feedback, either in support or not in support, and for us to make those final decisions on whether it's 5 officers, 7 officers, 8, 10. And that's what I'm looking forward to as well, as Councilman Ross stated, that it really is going to boil down to all the feedback we get at the end of the day. And so if there needs to be a motion, I'm happy to make that motion as stated.
Mr. Pearl, do we need a motion or just a consensus?
Just a consensus.
All right, so the manager can be clear, is there a consensus to bring forward a proposal? It contains funding for 10 new police officers, plus the body camera system and the 3 new support staff.
Yes, from Councilwoman Avila.
Yes.
Yes, from me as well.
Yes, from Vice Mayor.
Okay, Mr. Fletcher?
Yes, yes, sir.
Thank
Yes,
you.
for me. And just one question or one point.
Sure.
If we could, again, let's look at other positions within the city that may not be utilized to their complete availability, to maybe look at using that person with the police department as the administrative type person. Just a thought. Try to tighten our belt and utilize the folks we already have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. Mr. Shelley?
No.
And I'm a no as well, for the reasons previously stated. All right, Madam Manager, I think you have your,
Wait, before we go, Mayor, if you don't mind, if I could, I definitely have direction on that. Thank you all for that. I just want to go through everything else we talked about and just make sure that we're coming back with everything that has been asked for this evening. So with respect to the mayor and council reductions for fiscal year 2020 and for fiscal year 2021, there is a consensus to make those changes. With respect to council consideration for park operations, rather than reduce the frequency of landscape mowing, we're going to look to how we can maybe change it and make it even more. With respect to the pool operation hours, we'll come back with some kind of hybrid plan and maybe even try to bring in community partners, but we'll follow up with the councilwoman to see what we can do there. A couple of other things you asked about, the $200,000 in the contingency, we can lower that as well, Mayor. You had asked for the explanation with regard to the reduced number for the maintenance of cars. We'll come back with that. We'll also come back with exactly when those police officers were hired before that you would ask for. We'll determine if the electricity for the Seminole has gone down, and if there. Oh, and I do want to remind everyone that there are one-on-one meetings coming up, as Carlos had mentioned, with the CRA with regard to the CRA budget. It'll be similar to the discussions that we had on the general fund budget. And we will also follow up, Mayor, with the assessment of the Speedway and whether there could be a tax reduction there. And unless there's anything that I left out, I think those are all of our follow-up items.
I think your notes were very accurate. Thank you.
Well, thank you all very much. And actually also the millage rates for reducing the operating, the debt millage rate, that's just.
That we know, that's
Okay.
they looked at come back, and that was more important.
Okay. Mayor, council members, thank you all very much. I appreciate your time, your thoughts.
Thank you all, council and staff. Appreciate it. Anything else from council?
Nope.
Thank you all. Meeting adjourned. Good night.
Have a great night.